This is the last of the 20-inch fat tire bikes that we'll be reviewing for the foreseeable future. This is the TST Buddy, which is a folder from TST Wheels. And this one took a little longer for me to put together. The bike comes extremely well packed, and everything is came without any damage whatsoever. It took me a little longer to put together because there's a couple of things different about them. Their headset is a little different, which took me a couple of minutes to figure out how to do, and then you have to attach the kickstand to it, and then you have to attach the rear derailleur guard, which most of the previous bikes came with those things already attached. Everything else is pretty much the same. You put it on the front wheel and you put on the front fender, and you attach the handlebar to the headset. So that part's all the same. Just took a little while longer because of 3 extra steps on this bike. But anyway, it was pretty easy to put together. I think it took me about 30-40 minutes to put this thing together. And overall, I really liked the simplicity of this bike. And I think, in my opinion, so this is just my personal opinion about bikes, they would have done better to kind of lean into the simplicity and the lightweight aspect of it and get rid of a lot of features and make it a cheaper, lighter bike, mainly by putting smaller wheels on it, thinner wheels rather, not smaller, and then getting rid of the rear rack and the fender and and the shocks and making it a non-suspension bike. And that I think could have saved a couple $100 maybe, and then they would get at a better price point. But if you want a folding fat tire bike with front suspension, that is relatively lightweight. This one's probably around 50 pounds. Then I think this is a great bike for you, especially if you don't need a lot of range. Because there's a lot of bikes that have kind of ridiculous range, and you don't really need that much range. So here it is all put together. It has 20-inch fat tire wheels, 10 amp hour battery, 48-volt battery. It has front suspension, no rear suspension, which I think is a good thing actually. All right, so let me tell you what I like and dislike about this bike. What I do like about this bike is they tried to keep it simple. They didn't put a rear suspension on it, which I think personally is a total waste on a fat tire bike. Fat tire bikes, the tires themselves are so thick that they even out the ride. And it's not like anyone's gonna plan on taking off on big jumps on one of these bikes, or at least I don't think that's its intended use, and you shouldn't do it. So I think rear suspension is a waste of money. It adds weight and complexity, and it's totally useless. So they made the right decision. It has a rigid, it's a hardtail bike. It folds right here in the middle. What I really like about this is it has a key that you put in there. I'm digging out of my pocket. So here's the key, and then you put it in here. So in this position, it will turn on. In this position, if you take it out, it will not turn on. And then I'll show you here. This is how you unlock the bike to fold it. If you open this up, the battery is in here, but the battery does not come out because of this tab here. But if you turn this all the way, then you can pull it out and the battery will come out. So the key both turns on the bike and locks and unlocks the battery from the inside. Okay, so once the key is in, you can turn it on. So it turns on, and here's the pedal, the levels of pedal assist. It goes from 0 to 5. And here's your battery meter, so no problem there. So yeah, so it's a simple bike, and I like this. I haven't seen this on any of their bikes, but there's a place to put a bottle cage here. That's very useful if you want to carry a bottle on your bike. Other than that, fairly simple folder. You can adjust the height of the handlebar right here, but you can't adjust it very far. You can only adjust it maybe 2-3 inches because the cables, they get tense if you take it too much higher than this. But It's a very upright position, which I personally don't like, but I know a lot of people like an upright position on their bike. I prefer the handlebars to be much lower than this, but this is low enough that it's about waist high when you walk with it, so it's comfortable to walk the bike with the handlebars in this position. Some of the other bikes, like the Angway Pro, the handlebar is much too high, and it's very uncomfortable to walk around with it because it's up so high. And it makes for a really upright position, which is extremely uncomfortable for me. All right, so what I don't like about it in particular is it has mechanical disc brakes, which are okay and they work fine. The bike stops no problem, but the modulation is just not as good as hydraulic brakes. But then at this price point, I don't know that I would expect hydraulic brakes. These lights are quite small, but actually they're very bright, so don't let the size of it fool you. What I wish they would have done is hooked up to the lights to the rear and made this bright. That would make it a little bit safer for night riding, but this is just a reflector. There is no rear light on this bike, so I wish they would have attached a rear wheel on this bike. The folding mechanism here is kind of the older folding mechanism that you've seen on some older folders. You pull this up, and hold on, pull this down. Sorry, I'm going to put this down for a second. Okay, so it takes me two hands to do it, but then you push that down, and then this folds over like this. And then what you'll notice here is when I was building this bike, I was a little confused by this, but this is the older threaded headset design. So you tighten this Allen wrench down to lock the position of the handlebars. Otherwise, it moves freely from the front wheel. So it's an older design of the headset, and that's a threaded headset. Okay, so that's fine. Threaded headsets worked well for many, many years. It's just an older design. If you're not used to it, then you won't know how to assemble this. And it took me a little longer to figure out how to assemble this. Extra 5 minutes to figure out it was a threaded headset. The front fork does not have any tensioning or adjustment or lockout, which I think is fine. And honestly, I wish they would have just gotten rid of front shocks. I wish that this was a rigid front fork, and that would have made the bike better in my opinion. Everything else is great. The pedals are comfortable. They fold. And this is one of the few bikes that actually functions as a folder. The other folder bikes that I've reviewed are just too big. And even in a folded position, they take up too much space to be loaded in anything other than an SUV, van, or truck. So you couldn't really put this in a regular car. This I can actually put in a regular car. A full-size car, not a small car, but I can fit it in the trunk of a sedan, which is pretty impressive. So it actually works as a folder. And what would have made this better for me is if they would have just leaned into the simplicity of it, made it a rigid fork, made it maybe 2-inch tires instead of these 4-inch fat tires, and that would have made it a lot lighter. And that would make it a lot more compact and be better. The range on this, on throttle only, it has a thumb throttle, was about 16 miles, which isn't bad for the size battery it has. And if you pedaled, I'm sure you could get at least 30 miles out of this thing, depending on terrain and your weight and how much you're pedaling. But just on throttle only, at maximum pedal assist, in very hilly terrain, it got about 16 miles. Very respectable. Okay, when it comes, it's locked at 20 miles per hour, but there's a way to unlock. Okay, this is how to unlock the speed on TST e-bikes. You hold down this and push the plus, minus, and the power button at once. Okay, then you'll get to this. Then you press plus and minus at the same time. Then you see this P1. Press the headlight button to P3. It'll be initially set at 0. That means that it's speed locked. If you set it at 1, now it's speed unlocked. And that's it. Now this is one of the few folding bikes that we got that you can actually fold and put into the back of a sedan. I have a Honda Clarity. It has a fairly big trunk, but none of the other bikes will fit in this trunk. And they are folding bikes, but it really requires you to have an SUV or a van or a truck to make it fit. But this one, here I am folding it. You just fold down the handlebar headset, and then you push down the seat, and then it folds in half, and then it's pretty heavy. I'm pretty weak, but It weighs probably like 55 pounds or something, and it's a little bit difficult to maneuver in there, but it actually does fit into the trunk of a standard size sedan, which if that's the kind of vehicle you have, then this will fit in there. It'll definitely fit in an Aptera, no problem whatsoever. It's a little heavy, so you'd have to scoot it in from the back quite a bit, but I think that wouldn't be much of an issue. And there's a little space in there. You could probably fit two of these things in an Aptera. Okay, so it rides pretty well. Like all fat tire bikes, they are very comfortable to ride because the tires are so big. On a downhill like this, you can see on the speedometer, and I checked this with my phone GPS, the speedometer is accurate on this. It's going about 29 miles per hour, so it pushes you to about 29 miles per hour. On the flats, you'll see that it goes in the mid 20s, like 23 to 25 miles per hour on throttle only. But if you pedaled a little bit, it would definitely go up to 25. Now, it's not geared in a way that 35 miles per hour is super comfortable. I mean, 30 miles per hour is very comfortable to pedal. So it should be geared a little higher if you wanted to do that. And that's one of my other kind of pet peeves about these fat tire bikes is that they don't really encourage people to pedal because they're so heavy that you really rely on the motor to do much of the work. And it's not geared in a way that you can comfortably go its maximum speed. And then has all these gears that you're probably not going to use. These low gears, you almost never use them on these bikes because when you're going up a hill, you want to go fast. You have a motor, so why not go fast? And so I never end up using any of the gears other than the highest gear. Now, the battery did run out on one of my commutes on this bike, and I ended up having to pedal it up a hill, which is extremely difficult because it has ridiculous rolling resistance and it's very heavy. So the combination of two makes it so that when you run out of batteries completely, you are going to be using the lower gears and pedaling pretty hard to not go very fast. Okay, so yeah, you see here it's going about 24 miles per hour. This is a flat area. But anyways, going back to the running out of the batteries, you have to pedal pretty hard and going up a hill. I was going like 6 or 7 miles per hour. It was pretty painful. But the good thing about this bike is that when it goes to zero, the engine doesn't completely cut out on you. It gives you kind of less and less power over time, and it's not like I had a previous e-bike that when it reached its voltage limit, the engine would just stop completely, and then you would have no boost at all, and that would be pretty terrible on one of this. But this one, it goes to zero, and then it reduces the power it gives you, so you just get less and less assist, but you are getting some assist for at least another mile or two after the battery is gone. And the way that most of these e-bikes, the way that their battery management works, I think it's by residual voltage. So initially, it'll stay at 100% for a while. And then when it gets to like 30% or 40%, the bottom 30% drops more quickly than the first 30%. So just be aware of that. It's not a linear process by which it does that. And so you just have to don't trust the battery gauges on any of these e-bikes. It'll seem like it's full and the range is not dropping at all until it gets towards the end, and it drops really precipitously. But anyways, the good news is I've run most of these bikes to completely empty, and what it does is it just gives you less and less power, and you have about a mile at which you lose power slowly. But when you do lose power on these bikes, it's extremely hard to pedal them, especially uphill. And even on a flat, you're not going to get going more than about 10, 12 miles per hour with some pretty aggressive pedaling. Okay, I mean, this is like one of my favorite parts of commuting by bike is watching here you go, it's like 31 miles per hour when you're going downhill, but watching the sunrise come over the mountains is pretty awesome. If you live in an area with mountains, it's especially in the winter in Southern California, the mountains get snow capped, and the view is pretty good. But anyway, overall, the bike is great if you want some bike that is a folder and has good power and not too much range, so it's not too expensive.